Your team is communicating constantly. They're not hiding and they're not silent, but your roadmap is still moving slower than it should. This video is about why, and it comes down to one word: escalation. I've worked with engineering leaders and CTOs who cleaned up decision rights, killed fake POs, and built real ownership into their systems, and almost every one of them hit the same wall after. The gate was gone, but the work still slowed down because escalation had quietly become the default operating system. Here's the part most leaders miss. A lot of the time, you're the one creating the escalation problem. I'll come back to that. 3 specific failures are killing your execution speed right now. I'm going to name all 3, show you exactly what each one costs, and give you the one-page tool that fixes all of them today. So let's go. Priya fixed ownership. She clarified decision rights, and the roadmap finally started moving. But every time the work got uncomfortable, the team escalated. Then Priya saw it. Escalation wasn't an emergency brake anymore. It was the engine. And when that happens, you, the leader, become the hidden routing ladder for every uncomfortable call your team doesn't want to own. Failure 1. Nobody on your team knows what actually deserves escalation, so they each invented their own private rule book. One engineer escalates the moment a stakeholder pushes back. Another waits until the delivery date is already in danger. A product manager escalates every disagreement because they don't want to own the conflict. The tech lead avoids escalation entirely because they don't want to look incapable. Same system, 4 different behaviors. That's not communication. That's unmanaged risk. Failure 2. Escalation becomes permission seeking. Your team isn't bringing you exceptions. They're bringing you normal trade-offs with a leadership-shaped escape hatch attached. They don't want to be the one who made the wrong call, so they make it your call. Escalation should surface exceptions. It should not transfer ownership. Failure 3, and it's the most expensive. Some teams hold everything internally until it's too late. By the time you hear about it, the deadline is already compromised. The budget hit is already locked in. You're not making decisions anymore. You're managing damage. Late escalation is usually not a courage problem. It's a trigger problem. Nobody knew when the issue crossed the line from normal friction to leadership level risk. Late escalation doesn't preserve autonomy. It destroys options. Here's what most leaders don't want to hear. You're the one creating this problem. They say they want empowered teams, and then they reward people for bringing every uncomfortable issue upward. Or they punish one bad autonomous decision so hard that everyone learns the safer move is escalation. The team isn't escalating because they're weak. They're escalating because the system made escalation the safest behavior. That's on the leader. So what does a real trigger look like? 5 questions. Answer all 5 for every roadmap item, and your team will never guess again. What level of risk requires escalation? What kind of cross-team conflict requires escalation? What stakeholder pressure requires escalation? What delivery impact requires escalation? What decision is outside the owner's defined domain? Real triggers are specific. Here's what specific actually sounds like. If the decision changes scope by more than X, escalate. If 2 decision owners disagree and it affects delivery, escalate. If stakeholder pressure conflicts with the agreed priority, escalate. If risk moves from contained to systemic, escalate. You see, that gives the team permission to move and a clear line for when to raise that flag. Here's how you implement this, though. Just 3 moves. First, separate friction from escalation. Normal disagreements and minor stakeholder discomfort stay with the owner. Only true exceptions escalate. Second, define triggers before escalation starts, not when things break. For each roadmap item, the owner knows exactly what conditions require escalation. Risk threshold, scope threshold, timeline threshold, cross-team conflict threshold, decision domain boundary. No guessing. Third, and most important, change the ask. Not bring me the problem. Bring me the decision point. Instead of letting people show up with anxiety, require 4 things from them. What changed? What options exist? What trade-off needs a decision? What recommendation does the owner have? Now that turns escalation from a dumping ground into a decision mechanism. Pick one active project. Pull the last 3 escalations. For each one, answer these. Was it a real exception or just friction? Did they bring a decision point or just anxiety? Was it early enough to preserve options? If you can't answer those cleanly, you don't have a system, you have a habit. I built a one-page tool to fix that. It's called the Escalation Trigger Map. 5 trigger categories: risk, conflict, stakeholder pressure, delivery impact, domain boundary. For each one, you define the exact threshold your team needs to escalate and the exact threshold they don't. 20 minutes, your team stops guessing. Decisions start moving. Most leaders think escalation is a team behavior problem. It's not. It's a system design problem, and you're the designer. Fix the triggers, change the ask, and watch how fast the team stops needing you to make their decisions. That's the job. If this landed, the next video on decision domain mapping is worth your time, so I'll see you there.